ballroom glittered like a dream that evening. Golden chandeliers spilled soft light across marble floors, while violins and cellos played a melody that felt more like a whisper than music. It was the kind of event where power wore tailored suits and beauty walked in gowns shimmering with wealth. People laughed with champagne glasses in hand, their voices echoing off the high walls as deals were struck under the disguise of polite conversations. For Jason Roy, this was routine. At just 38, he was already a billionaire whose empire stretched across technology, real estate, and media. Yet tonight his mind wasn't on profits or negotiations. His eyes constantly searched the crowd, but not for investors. He was watching his daughter, Pinky. She was just 9 years old, her tiny frame wrapped in a soft red dress that shimmered under the lights. She had her mother's eyes, bright and curious, but they often looked down, quiet, cautious, as if afraid of being seen. Unlike the other children of wealthy guests who played freely, laughed loudly, and competed for attention, Pinky stood in a corner by herself, holding a small notebook and pencil. She was deaf. Ever since birth, Pinky had lived in silence. Doctors had said she would never hear the sounds most people take for granted, the laughter of friends, the applause of success, even the gentle voice of her father when he whispered her name. To others in the ballroom, she was different, and in such glamorous circles. Different often meant invisible, and tonight, she truly was invisible. Guests walked past her as if she were part of the decor. Some children glanced at her curiously, but quickly moved away when they realized she couldn't respond like them. The adults? They were worse. Some smiled politely, others pretended she wasn't there. After all, she couldn't hear their compliments or shallow greetings, so what was the point? Jason noticed everything. His chest tightened, but he said nothing. The billionaire who could silence boardrooms with a single look stood powerless when it came to the silent world of his daughter. He wanted to protect her, but he also wanted her to learn strength. And yet he hated how people ignored her. Then came Anjali. She wasn't dressed like the other guests. No glittering jewelry, no expensive designer gown. She wore a simple cream-colored blouse with a beige skirt, neat but modest, almost out of place in that ocean of wealth. She wasn't a guest of power, but rather part of the staff, a young woman hired to assist with event coordination, making sure food arrived on time, tables stayed neat, and no guest left unattended. But unlike the others, her eyes didn't slide past Pinky. From across the room, Anjali noticed the little girl standing alone, clutching her notebook like it was her shield. Something stirred in her heart. Maybe it was because she knew what loneliness felt like. Maybe it was because, as a child, she too had often been ignored. She paused in her duties, took a quiet breath, and slowly walked toward the girl. Pinky noticed her approach. Her grip on the notebook tightened. She was used to people bending down, giving her a sympathetic smile, and then walking away when they realized she wouldn't respond with spoken words. Sometimes they spoke loudly, as if raising their voice would break her silence. She hated that the most. But this woman, this stranger, stopped a few steps away and simply knelt down to Pinky's level. Then, something unexpected happened. The woman raised her hands and signed, "Hello." Pinky's eyes widened. Her little lips parted as she stared in shock. Nobody in this glittering world of adults and children had ever spoken to her like this. Through sign language. For the first time that evening, Pinky's face lit up. Her hands moved quickly, uncertainly at first, but then with excitement. "You know sign?" Anjali smiled warmly and replied, her fingers moving gracefully. "Yes, I learned when I was young. My cousin is deaf." It was as if the silence around Pinky shattered. She laughed, a soundless laugh, her shoulders trembling with joy as she signed back, her little hands clumsy but eager. "They never talk to me." "Only Papa does," Anjali's heart clenched. She reached out, gently touching the girl's hand. "Well, now you have me too." Across the room, Jason saw everything. At first, he frowned. Who was this young woman with his daughter? Why was Pinky suddenly so animated, her hands flying in the air with more energy than he'd seen in weeks? He excused himself from a group of investors mid-sentence and walked closer, careful not to break the moment. When he stopped a few feet away, he caught it. Sign language, his stern face softened. His powerful eyes, so often filled with numbers and strategies, shone with something else. Gratitude. For months, Pinky's teachers had tried, but none had truly connected with her. Tutors came and went, but Pinky's silence remained heavy. Now here was a woman, not a teacher, not a family member, just someone who cared enough to notice. And that changed everything. "Pinky," Jason said softly. She turned, her red dress swirling slightly. She smiled at him, her eyes brighter than the chandeliers above. She signed something quickly to him, then pointed at Anjali. Jason's lips curved. He understood a little, just enough. She was saying, "She talks to me. She understands." Jason turned to Anjali. For a moment, their eyes locked. He saw no pity in her gaze, only kindness, only respect for his daughter. That respect meant more to him than all the praises he'd heard tonight. "Thank you," he said simply, his deep voice low. Anjali shook her head gently. "No thanks needed, sir. She's wonderful. She just needed someone to see her." And in that instant, something shifted in Jason's heart. For years he had been admired, envied, and even feared. But no one had ever looked at his daughter the way this woman just did, with genuine warmth, without calculation. He knew this night wasn't just about deals and champagne anymore. It was the beginning of something else, something unexpected. The music swelled again, but for Jason, the night had already changed. He wasn't thinking about the orchestra or the investors waiting to shake his hand. His gaze lingered on Pinky, whose hands moved with joy, her expressions alive. As Anjali mirrored each motion with patience and warmth, it had been months, no, years, since he'd seen his daughter smile so freely. But as that joy filled his heart, another thought crept in. Who exactly was this woman? The protective billionaire Jason Roy was not a man who trusted easily. His empire had taught him one painful lesson after another. People always wanted something. A share in his company, an introduction to his network, or simply the privilege of saying they knew him. Very few came without hidden agendas. And now here stood a woman, young, modest, unpolished in this world of diamonds and silk, connecting with his daughter in a way no one else ever had. He couldn't ignore it. But he also couldn't allow himself to believe it so quickly. He waited, observing, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Anjali, meanwhile, had forgotten the glittering hall around her. For once, she wasn't an event coordinator juggling tasks or bowing politely to wealthy guests. For once, she wasn't the girl from a modest background who worked long hours just to support her younger siblings back home. She was simply a friend. Pinky signed eagerly about her drawings, showing Anjali her notebook filled with sketches, little houses, flowers, stick figures of herself and her father. "You draw beautifully," Anjali signed back, her smile gentle. Pinky giggled, pointing at one messy sketch of a man with huge glasses. She signed, "That's Papa when he's angry." Anjali laughed softly, covering her mouth so as not to draw attention. Her heart ached with sweetness. How could such a bright child be so overlooked in a room full of people? She glanced up briefly, only to meet Jason's eyes across the room. His stare was steady, unreadable but powerful. Heat rushed to her cheeks. Had she overstepped? Was he angry that she had approached his daughter without permission? But Pinky's tug on her hand pulled her back. The girl was asking her to play a game, simple hand gestures, clapping, mimicking movements. And so she stayed, pouring her attention into the child who so desperately needed it. The interruption. Of course, in such a glamorous crowd, whispers spread quickly. "Who is she?" One guest muttered, eyes narrowing at Anjali. "Isn't she one of the staff?" Another added with disdain, "Imagine the Roy girl!" laughing with a maid. The words carried an edge of cruelty. In their eyes, Anjali didn't belong. They didn't see the miracle happening in that corner, the connection that no wealth could buy. But Jason heard. He always heard, and something in him burned. He excused himself from his circle of acquaintances, his tall frame moving with quiet authority. The whispers silenced as he approached. His presence was magnetic. People stepped aside without a word. When he reached them, Pinky looked up, her eyes glowing with excitement. She signed rapidly, pointing to Anjali. She understands me, Papa. She talks like me. Jason knelt down, his expensive suit brushing against marble. He looked at his daughter, then at Anjali. Is this true? His voice was low but steady. Anjali swallowed. Yes, sir. I know sign language. My cousin is deaf, so I learned. I didn't mean to intrude. I just couldn't watch her standing alone. Her honesty was disarming. There was no flattery in her tone, no hunger for attention. Just truth. For a long moment, Jason said nothing. His sharp gaze searched her face, as though he could read her soul. Finally, he nodded. Most people ignore what they don't understand. Thank you for not being like them. Anjali blinked, caught off guard. That was the closest thing to praise she had ever received from a man like him. The spark of respect. The evening drew on. But from that point, everything shifted. Pinky refused to leave Anjali's side. Wherever the girl went, Pinky followed, dragging her along, showing her drawings, teaching her silly games. And Anjali obliged, her heart melting more with each passing minute. Jason watched quietly, his mind torn. He wanted to ask questions. Who was this woman? Where was she from? What did she want? But he also didn't want to break the fragile happiness his daughter had found. Instead, he stayed close, listening when Anjali translated Pinky's signs, smiling faintly at the little stories. For the first time in years, he wasn't the billionaire in the room. He was just a father, watching his daughter finally be seen. A subtle warning, but not everyone was pleased. Later that night, as guests began leaving, one of Jason's business associates approached him. A man with slicked back hair and a sly grin. Jason, he said smoothly, glancing toward Anjali. Be careful. These kinds of women, they see an opportunity and take it. Don't let kindness blind you, Jason's jaw tightened. She's been kinder to my daughter in one night than most people have in years. That matters more than your warnings. The man smirked, but he said nothing more. Still, his words lingered in Jason's mind, because trust was not something he gave easily, a promise unspoken as the ballroom finally quieted. Jason found himself standing with Anjali and Pinky near the exit. Pinky was drowsy, her small hand clutching both her father's and Anjali's. She refused to let go of either. Looks like she doesn't want this night to end, Anjali said softly. Glancing at the child's sleepy smile, Jason studied her, his voice deep. You've done something no tutor, no specialist, no family member has managed in years. You gave her laughter, Anjali lowered her gaze. I didn't give her anything, sir. She already had it. She just needed someone to see it. Something in those words struck him. A truth so simple, yet so rare. And though he didn't say it aloud, Jason made a silent promise that night. Whatever else happened, he would not let this connection vanish. The mansion was silent except for the faint ticking of a golden clock in the hallway. Outside, the city lights glowed like scattered diamonds across the night. Jason sat in his study, a glass of untouched whiskey on the mahogany desk, his fingers tapping restlessly. He had faced hostile takeovers, legal battles and betrayals worth millions, but tonight his mind was troubled by something entirely different. Anjali. The way Pinky had clung to her, laughed with her, trusted her so easily, it stirred something in him. A longing he hadn't felt in years. But with that longing came fear, because in his world, trust always had a cost. Pinky's new world. The next morning, Jason's mansion buzzed with quiet activity. Maids prepared breakfast, gardeners trimmed the hedges, and security checked the gates. Amid the order and wealth, Pinky sat at the long dining table, her sketchbook open. But this morning, her drawings were different. Instead of lonely figures or stiff portraits of her father, she had drawn something new, herself and Anjali laughing together. Jason noticed as he poured coffee. His chest tightened. Pinky rarely drew people outside their small world. She signed quickly, her eyes shining. When can I see her again? Jason hesitated. His schedule was tight, and Anjali was just an event staff member. He could hire tutors, specialists, even therapists, but his daughter wanted none of them. She wanted her. Finally, he signed back, his movement slower than hers. We'll see. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a refusal either. And Pinky smiled. An unexpected visit. 2 days later, fate decided for him. Anjali arrived at the mansion gates, nervously clutching a folder. She hadn't planned on seeing Jason again, but she had received a call from the event agency. Payment disputes, paperwork to be signed. Her job required her to deliver the documents personally. The guards eyed her suspiciously. In her simple clothes, she didn't look like someone who belonged at the Roy estate. Still, her name had been cleared by the office, so they let her through. As she stepped inside the grand foyer, she felt her heart race. The marble floors gleamed, chandeliers glittered, and priceless art lined the walls. She had never been inside a place so intimidating. Then a small voice, or rather no voice, interrupted her awe. "Anjali!" Pinky came running, her little hands flying with signs. "You came! You came!" The child's joy was so pure that Anjali's nerves melted away. She knelt and hugged her. "I missed you too, Pinky." From the staircase, Jason appeared, his tall frame commanding the room. His eyes softened at the sight of his daughter's happiness, but his voice remained steady. "You're back." Anjali stood quickly, clutching the folder. "Sir, I'm just here for paperwork from the agency. I didn't mean to intrude." Pinky tugged her sleeve, signing furiously to her father. "Don't let her go!" Jason's lips curved into the faintest smile. He gestured toward the study. "Come, we'll settle the paperwork." The study and counter inside, the atmosphere was heavier. Shelves of leather-bound books lined the walls, and the scent of cedarwood filled the air. Jason took the folder, scanning it quickly. His mind worked fast, but his eyes kept flicking toward her. "You know," he said finally, his tone measured, "most people at that event avoided my daughter." "You didn't. Why?" Anjali hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Because I know what it feels like to be invisible." He raised his brows. "Invisible?" She looked down, fidgeting with her hands. "My family was never wealthy. My father died young, and my mother worked herself sick trying to raise us. I was the eldest, so I became the second parent for my younger siblings. I worked at events like yours to keep food on the table. To people in your world, I don't exist. I'm just..." Background. Jason studied her silently. She wasn't asking for pity. Her voice carried quiet strength. "And Pinky," she continued, her voice softening, "she reminds me of that feeling." Everyone looked past her. "But she doesn't deserve to be invisible. She's brilliant, Jason. She just needs someone to see her." The way she said his name, without fear, without flattery, startled him. Few people dared. For the first time in years, he felt seen, the storm of society, but outside those walls, the world wasn't so kind. When word spread that the billionaire's daughter had taken a liking to a common staff woman, whispers turned to rumors. Some called Anjali an opportunist. Others mocked Jason for allowing his daughter to bond with someone beneath their circle. At a charity dinner a week later, one woman sneered, "Isn't it dangerous, letting outsiders so close to the child? What if she wants more than friendship?" Jason's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. Public scenes weren't his style. Still, the comments clawed at his mind. Could it be true? Was he blinded by gratitude? That night, he confronted Anjali. The confrontation in the garden, under moonlight, Jason stood tall, his face unreadable. Anjali stood before him, nervous but steady. "Why are you here?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Why do you keep coming back?" Her breath caught. "Because she asks for me. Because she smiles when I'm here." That's not an answer. His eyes pierced hers. "You could take advantage of this. People already say you're using her to get close to me." Anjali's face flushed with hurt. "Do you think that too?" He was silent. Silence was worse than accusation. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to break. "I don't want your money. I don't want your world. I just care for her." "Isn't that enough?" The crack in her voice pierced him more than any argument. For a man who had built walls around his heart, it was dangerous to hear such raw honesty. He turned away, his jaw tight. "Care is dangerous. It makes you weak," Anjali shook her head. "No, it makes you human." For the first time, Jason had no reply. Pinky's silent plea the next morning, Pinky sensed the tension. "Children always know." She tugged at her father's sleeve, signing quickly. "Don't be angry at Anjali. She's my friend." "Please, Papa." Jason looked at her. torn between the fierce protector and the aching father. Finally, he signed back slowly, "I will try." Pinky smiled, hugging him tightly, and though he didn't admit it aloud, Jason realized that the walls around his heart were beginning to crack, thanks to two people who had taught him that silence could still speak louder than words. The monsoon rain lashed against the tall glass windows of Jason's mansion. Thunder rolled across the city, but inside the house felt warm. A fire crackled in the marble fireplace, casting shadows across the sitting room where Pinky lay curled under a blanket, sketching. Beside her sat Anjali, reading each drawing, laughing silently with her hands and praising Pinky's every effort. The girl glowed under her attention. From the far end of the room, Jason watched. He stood tall, one hand in his pocket, his shirt sleeves rolled up after a long day of meetings. He looked less like the billionaire tycoon tonight and more like a weary man, a father. And for the first time in years, his gaze softened with something he wasn't ready to admit: longing. A new kind of evening. After Pinky drifted off to sleep, Anjali carefully tucked the blanket around her. She rose quietly, ready to leave, but Jason's voice stopped her. "Stay a moment." She froze, then turned. He gestured toward the veranda, where the rain fell in sheets. They stepped outside, the storm muted by the shelter above. Cool air brushed past them as lightning briefly lit the sky. For a while neither spoke. The silence between them was not heavy this time. It was almost comfortable. Finally, Jason said, "You've changed her world in just weeks." She laughs more. She draws more. She smiles. Anjali lowered her gaze. "I haven't changed her, sir. I only listened. Sometimes that's all a child needs." He looked at her, really looked at her. There was no greed in her eyes, no hidden motive, just sincerity. In a world where everyone wanted a piece of him, that sincerity was rare, dangerously rare. "You speak like you've known loss," he said quietly. She swallowed. "I have. My father died when I was 12. My mother worked herself sick to raise us. I never had the luxury of being a child. I understood loneliness too well." Jason's chest tightened. He had known wealth all his life, but he had also known betrayal, abandonment. For a moment, their worlds, so different, felt closer, and in that silence his hand brushed against hers on the railing. Neither pulled away. The storm outside raged, but inside, a softer storm began to brew. The beginning of a bond. In the following days, their paths crossed more often. Jason began joining their evening sessions, watching as Anjali taught Pinky new signs. Sometimes, Pinky would sign clumsy jokes, and Anjali would translate, making him laugh. An unfamiliar sound in the vast halls of the mansion. Once Pinky signed mischievously, "Papa likes you." Anjali turned crimson, shaking her head furiously while Jason coughed, pretending not to understand. But inside his heart pounded. It was dangerous. Too fast, too fragile. Yet undeniable. The world strikes back. But the world beyond the mansion had sharp claws. At a high-profile charity gala, Jason made the mistake of bringing both Pinky and Anjali. He had thought it would be good for Pinky, to show her she didn't need to hide. And perhaps deep down he wanted the world to see Anjali as he had begun to see her. Strong, kind, worthy. But the whispers were crueler this time. Isn't she just a maid? A billionaire with her? Impossible. She must be using the child as a stepping stone. The words reached the media within hours. By the next morning, headlines splashed across tabloids. Billionaire Jason Roy, seen with mystery woman, staff or secret lover. Photographs of Jason, Anjali and Pinky laughing together filled the internet. But the captions twisted the truth. Social climber charms Roy family. The clash that morning, Jason stormed into the sitting room, the newspaper crushed in his fist. Anjali stood frozen as he dropped it on the table. "Do you see this?" His voice was sharp, filled with the fury of a man cornered. "They've turned my daughter into gossip. Because of you." Anjali's face paled. "I never asked for this." "I didn't call them. I didn't." "But you were there," he cut in, his eyes like steel. Smiling, laughing, drawing attention. "Don't you see what they think?" "They think you're—" Her voice cracked, but her dignity held. "They think I'm using you. Isn't that what you're afraid of too?" Silence. His jaw clenched, his fists tight. He didn't answer. And in his silence she saw the doubt. Her eyes brimmed, but she refused to let the tears fall. I came into Pinky's life because she needed a friend, not because you're rich. But if you can't see that, if all you see is what the world says, then maybe I don't belong here after all. She turned and left, her footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. And for the first time in years, Jason felt the sting of loss he couldn't buy his way out of. Pinky's heartbreak. That evening, Pinky searched every room for Anjali. When she couldn't find her, she ran to her father, her hands trembling as she signed furiously. "Where is she? Why isn't she here?" Jason knelt, his heart breaking as he struggled to respond. His hands moved slowly. "She's not coming today." Pinky shook her head violently, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, I need her." She listens. "She's my friend." "You promised!" Her sobs filled the silent mansion, each tear cutting deeper into Jason's chest. For the first time, he felt helpless, not as a billionaire, but as a father who had broken his child's heart. And in that moment, he realized the truth. It wasn't just Pinky who needed Anjali. Here's section 4 of your story. Continuing with deep emotion and drama, section 4, Whispers of Trust. The days that followed were like a gentle sunrise after a long, stormy night. Jason Roy had always been a man of steel, commanding respect and fear wherever he walked. But something about Anjali's presence was softening the iron walls around his heart. And Pinky, his precious daughter, was blooming like never before. Anjali continued to tutor Pinky in the evenings, her hands flowing with graceful precision as she taught her new signs, turning silence into laughter, isolation into connection. Jason often found himself standing quietly in the doorway, watching them, his heart tugged in ways he couldn't put into words. One evening, Pinky tugged at Anjali's sleeve and signed eagerly, "Can we go outside?" Anjali smiled. "Of course, little one." They walked out into the sprawling gardens of the Roy mansion. Flowers in every shade painted the path. Fountains whispered secrets in the background, and Pinky's laughter echoed, not in sound, but in spirit. Jason soon joined them, leaving behind his laptop and endless phone calls. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to sit on the grass, his designer suit wrinkling without care. "Papa," Pinky signed with her small hands, her eyes glowing. "Will you play with us?" Jason hesitated. Play was something he hadn't known since his wife passed away. But Anjali gave him a gentle nod, her smile encouraging. Slowly, he stretched his arms, and together they chased bubbles that Anjali blew into the evening sky. Pinky's giggles shone brighter than any diamonds he owned. An unexpected confession. Later that night, when Pinky had gone to bed, Jason found himself lingering in the living room where Anjali was quietly putting away toys. "You've done something no doctor, no therapist, no tutor has managed to do," Jason said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard. Anjali looked up, puzzled. "What do you mean, sir?" "You've brought my daughter back to life," he said simply, his gaze locking with hers. Her heart raced. She wasn't used to praise, especially from someone like him. Pinky already had the strength inside her. All she needed was someone to believe in her. Jason's lips curved into the faintest smile. "And you believe." A silence lingered between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. The shadow of doubt. But happiness is fragile and wealth invites whispers. Rumors soon began swirling in Jason's high society circle. At a gala dinner, where crystal chandeliers lit up the night, Anjali attended by Pinky's side. While she wore a simple dress, her poise made her stand out among jeweled women draped in arrogance. "She's just a maid in disguise," one woman hissed behind her glass of wine. Or worse, after Jason's fortune, another smirked. Pinky, though deaf, caught the mocking expressions and the cruel curl of their lips. She clung to Anjali's hand tightly, her eyes filling with silent tears. Anjali bent down and signed to her, "Ignore them, Pinky. You're stronger than their words." Jason noticed, his eyes hardening like steel. Later, he confronted one of his so-called friends. "Say another word against her, and you'll find yourself out of my circle, permanently." The hall went silent. For the first time, the billionaire defended not his business, not his wealth, but the dignity of two souls who had become his world. A storm on the horizon. That night, as Anjali prepared to leave the mansion, Jason stopped her at the grand staircase. "Anjali," he said, his voice low, almost vulnerable. "Stay, not just for Pinky, but for me." Her heart pounded. The line between duty and emotion blurred dangerously. She lowered her eyes. "Mr. Roy, you don't know my past. You don't know me. Then tell me," he urged. Tears welled in her eyes. "I was abandoned as a child. Grew up fighting for scraps. I don't belong in your world." Jason stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet tender. "Neither do I. Money built my empire, but it destroyed my peace. Maybe what I need isn't another business deal. Maybe it's someone real. Someone like you." Anjali trembled, caught between fear and hope. Before she could answer, Pinky's small voice, clear, trembling, miraculous, echoed from the stairs above. "Papa, don't." "Let her go." Both adults froze. Pinky had spoken. For the first time in years, her voice broke through silence. Jason rushed to her, tears in his eyes, while Anjali covered her mouth in shock. The sound of Pinky's trembling voice lingered in the grand hallway like a miracle etched into eternity. For years, she had been locked in a world of silence, and now, because of Anjali, she had found the courage to break free. Jason held his daughter tightly, his tears soaking her hair. "You spoke, Pinky, my brave little girl. You spoke." Pinky smiled shyly, glancing at Anjali, and signed, "Because she believed I could." Anjali's own eyes brimmed with tears. She knelt beside them, gently brushing Pinky's cheek. "You've always been capable, sweetheart. I only reminded you of your strength." The three of them stayed in that embrace longer than words could measure. But as dawn broke the next morning, shadows of the world outside began to intrude on the fragile light of their newfound hope. A rift in the mansion, for all the joy Pinky's breakthrough brought. Whispers in the mansion staff corridors began to grow louder. "She's just a tutor," one maid muttered, her tone sharp. "Now she's living like the lady of the house. Have you seen how Mr. Roy looks at her?" "This isn't just about the child anymore," another said. "They say she's after his wealth. Men like him never see the truth until it's too late." Anjali overheard fragments of these cruel comments while passing by. They pierced her heart, even though she tried to brush them aside. She wasn't after Jason's fortune. If anything, she feared his world. But the gossip reminded her of her place, or rather the lack of one. That night, she sat in her small guest room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. "Anjali," she whispered to herself, "don't forget who you are. You came here for Pinky, not for him." But when she remembered the way Jason's eyes softened when he asked her to stay, her heart betrayed her resolve, Jason's silent battle. Meanwhile, Jason Roy sat alone in his study, the glow of a half-finished glass of whiskey on his desk. For years he had drowned himself in numbers, contracts, and empires, but tonight his mind was consumed by one question. Was he allowed to love again? He had buried his wife years ago, swearing never to let another woman near his heart. Yet Anjali had entered not with wealth or beauty, but with sincerity. She had reached him through Pinky, and now Jason felt a part of himself he thought was dead come alive again. But he knew the stakes. Society would not forgive him for choosing a woman without pedigree. His board of directors, his so-called friends, even his extended family, they would tear her apart. And worse, what if she left? What if she broke both his and Pinky's hearts? The Gala of Masks, the turning point, arrived at a charity gala organized by the Roy Foundation. Jason insisted Anjali and Pinky join him, determined to show the world that they were now his family in all but name. Anjali hesitated at first. "Mr. Roy, this world isn't mine. I don't belong in gowns and diamonds. You belong wherever Pinky smiles," Jason replied firmly. "And that's enough for me." So, on the night of the gala, Anjali appeared in a simple red gown, borrowed from the mansion's wardrobe, that made her glow despite its modest cut. Pinky, in a matching dress, clung to her hand, excitement sparkling in her eyes. The hall glittered with chandeliers and the rustle of silk. Cameras flashed as Jason Roy walked in with the two by his side. For a moment, the sight of the powerful billionaire with his daughter and her mysterious tutor stole the breath of the crowd. But admiration quickly soured into whispers. "Who is she? Not one of us, that's for sure." He's losing his mind over a commoner. Pinky noticed the sneers, her small shoulders tensing. She signed nervously to Anjali. Why are they staring? Do they hate me? Anjali bent down, her fingers moving gently. No, Pinky, they don't matter. You shine brighter than all their jewels. Jason watched, fury and pride warring within him. He raised his glass during the evening's toast, his voice echoing with authority. Tonight I don't just celebrate wealth. I celebrate resilience. My daughter Pinky has shown me that courage isn't measured in sound, but in spirit. And if you see this woman beside her, he gestured toward Anjali, know this. She is the reason my child laughs again. And for that, she has my loyalty, my gratitude, and perhaps... His voice faltered for a heartbeat. My heart, the whole gasped. Anjali froze, her cheeks burning as every eye turned to her. The enemy revealed, but not everyone celebrated this declaration. Among the crowd stood Vikram Malhotra, Jason's ruthless business rival, who had always envied his empire. He smirked, sipping his wine. Interesting, Vikram murmured. The mighty Roy has found a weakness. The next morning, Anjali received an anonymous letter slipped under her door. Her hands shook as she read, Stay away from Jason Roy. You don't belong in his world. If you don't leave, secrets from your past will be revealed, and you'll regret ever stepping into this mansion. Her chest tightened. Could it be true? Had her painful past, the orphanage, the struggles, the years of humiliation, been discovered? She hid the letter, but a seed of fear rooted in her heart. A confession interrupted that evening. Jason found her standing by the fountain, her face pale. Anjali, he said gently, I meant every word last night. I don't care what the world thinks, He paused, struggling, then whispered, I think I'm falling in love with you. Her heart swelled, tears blurring her vision. She wanted to say yes, to let herself dream. But the letter's words echoed like chains around her neck. Stay away. Secrets will be revealed. Before she could respond, Pinky ran out to them, waving her hands excitedly. She had drawn a picture of the three of them, Jason, Anjali, and herself, holding hands under a sun. Jason laughed softly, taking the drawing. See? Even Pinky knows we're meant to be. Anjali forced a smile, but inside she trembled. The twist of fate later that night, she packed her small suitcase in silence. Each item she folded felt like a knife cutting deeper into her heart. She couldn't risk Pinky losing her progress, nor Jason losing his reputation. When Jason knocked on her door, she quickly wiped her tears. Sir, she whispered, thank you for everything. But I can't stay here anymore. His face hardened. What are you saying? I don't belong here. Pinky needs someone stronger, someone permanent. I'm just me. Before he could argue, she placed the anonymous letter on the table. Your enemies know about me. If I stay, I'll only bring danger to your daughter. Jason read it, his jaw tightening. His hands shook with rage. Vikram, he muttered. Only he would stoop this low. Please understand, Anjali begged, her voice breaking. This is for the best. But as she walked toward the door, Pinky appeared, her small hands signing frantically, tears streaming down her face. Don't go, Anjali. You're my voice. My friend, my mama! The word mama tore through Jason's chest like lightning. He caught Anjali's arm, his voice raw. Don't leave us, Anjali. If you walk away now, you'll break both our hearts. Her suitcase slipped from her hands. Torn between fear and love, Anjali stood frozen as the storm of destiny raged around her. The mansion was cloaked in silence, broken only by the faint sobs of little Pinky. She stood in the hallway, her tiny hands trembling as she signed over and over. Don't go. Don't leave me, Mama. Anjali's eyes burned with tears. She wanted nothing more than to scoop the child into her arms and never let go. But the weight of the letter, the fear of Jason's world, and the scars of her own past pulled her back. Jason stood between them, his face shadowed with pain and fury. He held the letter tightly, his knuckles white. Anjali, he said, his voice low but commanding, this isn't your burden to carry. This is my fight. My enemies will not drive you away from us. Anjali shook her head. You don't understand. My past, if it comes out, you'll regret letting me into your lives. Then tell me, Jason demanded. No more running. No more secrets. I want to hear it from you, Anjali's truth. Her legs felt weak as she sank into a chair, her hands twisting in her lap. For years, she had hidden the truth in the darkest corners of her heart. But tonight she could no longer run. I grew up in an orphanage, she began softly. Abandoned at birth. I was told I wasn't wanted. That I was a mistake. I had no family, no name worth remembering. I survived by scrubbing floors, serving tea, being invisible. Her voice cracked. When I finally left, I carried nothing but shame. I swore I would never let anyone know because people only see orphans as less. She lifted her eyes, brimming with tears. That's who I am, Jason. Not a woman for a billionaire. Just a forgotten girl who stumbled into your world. The room was silent. Even the ticking clock seemed to hold its breath. Then Jason stepped forward, kneeling before her. He took her hands firmly in his. Listen to me, Anjali. You think your past makes you unworthy. But to me it makes you extraordinary. You built yourself from nothing, with no one to guide you, and still, you have more strength and compassion than anyone I've ever met. That doesn't make you less. It makes you more. Her tears spilled freely. For the first time, someone wasn't looking at her with pity, but with admiration. The enemy strikes, but just as hope flickered, darkness pushed back. The next day, Vikram Malhotra made his move. Tabloid headlines screamed across the city. Billionaire Jason Roy, ensnared by orphan-turned-tutor, a scandal in high society. The media frenzy was brutal. Paparazzi camped outside the Roy mansion, shouting questions and snapping pictures. Business partners began calling, questioning Jason's judgment. Some even threatened to withdraw investments. Inside, Anjali felt suffocated. This is exactly what I feared, she whispered. Your empire is at risk because of me. But Jason stood tall, his jaw set like steel. Let them talk. Let them write their stories. I know the truth, and so does Pinky. That's all that matters. Still, the storm raged louder when Vikram personally confronted him at a board meeting. You're a fool. Jason, Vikram sneered in front of the directors. Trading billions for a maid's affection? You've lost your edge. Jason rose slowly, his eyes cold as fire. No, Vikram. I've found what you'll never have, loyalty, love, and a family worth protecting. My empire doesn't define me. They do, the boardroom went silent. For once, the billionaire had spoken not as a tycoon, but as a man. Pinky's courage back at the mansion. Pinky overheard the chaos. She had watched her papa fight battles in silence for years, but now she knew she had to fight too. So during the next public charity event, she stood bravely before the crowd. Her small hands moved in perfect sign language, her face glowing with determination, Anjali translated. Her voice trembling as she spoke the words aloud. My name is Pinky Roy. I cannot hear like you, but I feel everything. People ignored me until Anjali came. She gave me a voice. She gave me love. She is not just my tutor. She is my mama. And if you cannot accept her, then you do not deserve to be in our lives. Gasps filled the hall. Some wept, others clapped. But one thing was certain. No one could ignore the raw truth in the child's plea. Jason, watching from the side, felt his heart nearly burst with pride. He lifted his daughter in his arms, kissing her forehead. That's my brave girl. A proposal beyond wealth. That night, Jason gathered the courage he had been holding back for too long. Under the starlit sky of the garden, with the fountain whispering in the background, he turned to Anjali. You've stood by my daughter when the world ignored her. You've stood by me when enemies tried to tear us apart. I don't care about your past, Anjali. I only care about our future. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was not a massive diamond, but a simple ring, elegant, timeless, meaningful. Will you marry me? He asked, his voice trembling with sincerity. Not because you fit into my world, but because you've created a new one for me and Pinky. A world where love speaks louder than wealth. Anjali's tears streamed down as she covered her mouth in shock. Pinky, bouncing with joy, signed eagerly. Say yes, Mama. Please say yes. Anjali's hands shook as she whispered, Yes, 1,000 times, yes. Jason slipped the ring onto her finger, his own eyes wet. The three of them embraced beneath the stars. A father, a daughter, and the woman who had bound them together with the language of love. A new dawn weeks later, the world had begun to quiet. The media, hungry for scandal, was silenced by the undeniable sight of a happy family. The Roy empire did not collapse. It grew stronger, reshaped by Jason's newfound authenticity. Anjali officially adopted Pinky as her daughter. The papers, once filled with gossip, now celebrated the story of resilience and love. Headlines read, "From orphan to inspiration, Anjali Roy, the woman who gave the billionaire's daughter a voice." But for Jason, it wasn't about reputation. For Pinky, it wasn't about society. And for Anjali, it wasn't about wealth. It was about the three of them. Sitting in the garden one evening, Pinky signing happily while Anjali laughed and Jason listened, not with his ears, but with his heart. One evening, Pinky tugged at Anjali's sleeve and signed a question. "Mama, what is love?" Anjali smiled, glancing at Jason, who reached for her hand. She signed back gently, her voice soft. "Love is when someone sees you, truly sees you, and never lets you feel alone again." And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet magic of their bond, they knew their story had only just begun.